Welcome to Personal, the podcast where we get to meet the real person behind the professional. I am super pleased to be welcoming JJ Chalmers, TV and radio presenter, onto the podcast today. Now, just a reminder of the rules, JJ. No business or self-promotional questions or answers. No small talk. Honest answers only, please. And I'm happy for you to flip any of the questions back to me.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Noted.
Obviously, some might not be relevant, but anyway, let's head in. We often start with a bold question.
Okay.
Do you feel lucky to be alive or unlucky that you were injured so badly when you were out in Afghanistan?
That's a great question. So luck only played a part in like one moment of what happened to me in Afghanistan, everything that came after it. And that is the moment when the bomb goes off and I survive it. Like that is, you know, in a situation where there's an explosion, there's rubble flying everywhere and there's chaos ensuing within a second, to survive that moment in a way that sadly two of my friends didn't, that's the only bit I see luck in. Everything that comes after that isn't luck, because my life was saved by Royal Marine Commandos who were unbelievably good at saving your life within the first 5 minutes. I was onto a helicopter that was staffed by the bravest and best pilots and medical crew into a hospital that had the best medical team. None of that is luck, and that continues throughout. And as I sit here now, like if I were to, for any moment, think to myself, or, you know, of you to think that actually this should never have happened to me. I shouldn't have ended up disabled. I should never have been injured. It doesn't work like that. First of all, like, I made a decision to become a Royal Marine Commando at the age of 17. And that decision would ultimately lead to my moment of injury and now a life with a disability. And people get hurt in wars. That's what happens. We need brave people willing to do that, essentially. And I was happy to be one of those people at the time. And so if you look at me and go, this should never have happened to him, like, you know, he shouldn't have to live the rest of his life like this. The reality is I look at it and go, I should be in a box in the ground, because that's the way that it probably should have turned out.
Really? On paper, should you be dead?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the moment of luck that I survived when, who knows, stood 1 inch to the side, stood on a slightly different place, you know, turned my head the wrong direction. Those minuscule little butterfly effects could have been the difference.
And do you think about that, those minuscule effects?
I used to, but it's been long enough. It's 12 years since I was injured, and so it's been long enough that I don't replay it now, and I don't long to understand what could have been different. Rather, I just accept that it happened, and I have like to think I've made the best of that situation.
Mm-hmm. And so, was it one of your fellow Marines that stood on the IED and then triggered the explosion? Can you remember the thought processes that went through your mind?
Yeah, so like I took a knock to the head that day that ultimately means that I can remember like split-second images of the whole day. So like the majority of that day, from waking up in the morning to ending up on an operating table an hour after the blast went off, like that's all gone, except for just enough fragments that I can piece it together. And one of those fragments is the moment where it essentially happened. And I didn't actually remember that immediately. It was months and months later. Somebody mentioned something to me and it kind of sparked a memory. And so I remember, I suppose that reminded me of the moment before it happened, which was, as extreme a situation as it was, being in a bomb-making factory in Afghanistan, it was very normal. Like, it was just a Friday at work, as far as I was concerned. And so when the blast went off and I was lying on the floor in sort of head-to-toe pain, one of my eyes was badly damaged, so like I couldn't really see what was going on, and I was kind of pinned by my kit. It was like a turtle kind of stuck on his back. In amongst all that chaos and the dust settling and my ears ringing, just all that horror, there was a confusion as to what the hell's happened. Like, oh, and probably a few seconds later going like, you've been blown up. Like this thing which you always thought would never happen to you had happened. So there's definitely that sort of immediate thought of just like, what have you done in some ways?
Yeah.
Like, how did you manage to end up being this guy? And then it was very quickly followed by, as corny as it sounds, the training kicks in and you're like, deal with it. Got to do something about this.
Wow. And can you even come close to explaining how painful it was?
Yeah. No, because although I live with pain to like this day, the thing about pain is you only feel it in that moment. Like it was every inch of my body was in agony. Like one of my friends who was part of the sort of clear up of it all, was part of getting me onto the helicopter. It sounds a bit graphic, but he described it as I looked like I'd been peeled. And so what that means is like every single inch of, like my clothes had just turned red, and like every single part of my body, although it was more or less still there except for a couple of fingers, it had sustained at least like a graze. Do you know what I mean? It was just death by 1,000 cuts. And so, I don't know, maybe it felt like I was on fire. But I just remember kind of wriggling around trying to find some point of comfort. And you're like, I'm never going to find that. And the other thing is I remember sort of just screaming to try and get the pain out of my body. That was my response of just like, oh, get this out of me. But none of that did anything.
And did you have any out-of-body experiences at the time? Some people describe when they've been in so much pain, they've heard the screaming as though it's coming from another body, but then realised it was themselves. Yeah,
like it was definitely, like I wasn't sort of living the situation from another point of view, but because I lived through that part with my eyes closed, basically, because one of them was damaged, I definitely was kind of hearing what was going on, and I wasn't the only one hurt, so I was taking in what was just chaos around me, and that was the chaos of other people clearly being hurt, but more importantly, people dealing with the situation. And it was just like this noise of people shouting to one another and checking up on me, helicopters whirling. It was just like kind of a sensory overload for my ears. And the thing they always say as well is that your hearing is the first and last thing to go. So when you get put into a coma, you continue to hear. So the last thing I remember is the sound of the helicopter whirring. Although I wasn't quite asleep at that point, I had a lot of drugs in me. I can still remember the whirring noise of the helicopter. And then waking up, because like being in a coma is like it's like a blink, and all of a sudden a week of your life's gone and you're on the other side of the world.
Wow.
But like waking up from sleep, you then begin to remember the dreams afterwards. And those dreams are based on the reality of what you've heard. And that's your family talking to you and little snippets of information that you've picked up along the way. And so, yeah, it's a weird, chuck in the fact that you're on a lot of drugs as well. It's an unbelievable experience for both trying to take that in and trying to understand the level of pain you're in.
Yeah. And was that initial moment the most painful experience, or did it come later, or part of surgery?
Yeah, that one was bad, that was for sure. And actually when I first woke up from the coma, I think I had a blissful few minutes where I wasn't in pain yet. And then that first night out of the coma was one of the worst nights of my life, where I knew I was going for surgery at like, I don't know, 9 o'clock the next morning or something. And like, to the point where I made them move the clock from in front of my bed because it just didn't feel like it was moving.
Oh, goodness.
And I was in so much pain, and they were still pumping drugs into me, but that can make you comfortable, maybe pain-free, no chance. And so you're just gritting your teeth until you get put to sleep again for a surgery. And that was life for a good week or so. And then the last time that I really remember having a shocker pain-wise was they sewed my arm into my stomach. I
read that. How does that even... I can't get my head around it.
It's pretty wild. Listen, I didn't really get my head around it at the time either. So as part, they'd sewn, they bolted me back together, put my bones back together, and screwed my fingers on, or whatever the heck it was. But there was still big holes in my body, and like my elbow, I'd lost most of the skin, flesh, tissue off of it. So, and this was like weeks after, I still had a big gaping hole and the chance of losing my arm, even though they'd fixed the joint to a degree. Like, you can't live with a hole in your arm.
Right.
And so they need to put like living, breathing tissue onto that, and that needs to be taken from somewhere. And so my abdomen was undamaged because I was wearing body armor. And so if you're relatively fit and healthy, they can take a piece of skin tissue off of you, lift it and sew it onto you. And if you're, fit and healthy, it will survive. But in the state that we were in, we were so physically destroyed by not just a blast, but just being in hospital for weeks on end. And so with that, they have to keep that alive by essentially, they kind of cut me round in a big D shape. It looks like a shark bite. But they leave it attached down the side of your abdomen. They stick your arm inside it, and then they sew the skin that is your abdomen over your arm. And what happens is it continues to take its blood supply from your abdomen.
Crazy.
But they've also plumbed it into your arm. And so slowly your body learns to supply blood to this big bit of flesh down your arm and not through your abdomen. And they reduce the size of the abdomen flap, as they would call it, over time. And eventually your body learns, oh, this piece of skin that was on my abdomen now lives here and is now supplied by this blood supply.
Wow.
So that's how they did that. But that took about, I can't remember. I was in surgery for 12 or 16 hours or something like that. It was huge. It was actually the day my wife, then girlfriend, graduated from university. And it was horrific. And I came out of that surgery really in a lot of pain, but just exhausted. I just had nothing left of me. And I remember that night just sort of sitting up in my bed in this really uncomfortable state that I'd lived for another 4 or 5 weeks. It was the first day of being sewn to yourself, which is not fun. And it was really bleak and really sore. But I do remember one of the nurses coming round, and she literally sat on the bed next to me and put her arm around me, and was just like, I'm praying for you. You're going to get through this, lad. And that was a night where I really had to sort of dig deep and be like, I don't know if I can make it through this one. It was really, and this was weeks and weeks after I'd been injured, but it was hard. I remember that one really, really hard.
Maybe the lowest moment.
Probably, yeah. I think that first week in ICU was tough, but I think it was probably the first time I'd gone from I'd been making progress to all of a sudden, oh, I'm back at the beginning, it feels like. And I think that is recovery. You're constantly getting knocked back. It's one step forward, 2 back. And that was probably the first time that I got a huge knockback and was like, oh, I'm so weak, I'm so feeble. And obviously that's a huge adjustment for who I was before as a Royal Marine.
Yeah, total extremes, isn't it?
Yeah, I just felt really, really feeble, I guess.
Oh, bless you. And surely you must have felt the need to keep pulling your arm away as well.
Yeah, the discipline involved in living attached to yourself. First of all, what they do is they just don't let you get out of bed. And that was really frustrating because most of the guys on the ward had lost a leg, or at the very least broken a leg. And actually they were up and about in wheelchairs, and my legs were damaged, but we're in one piece. The bones were in one piece. Theoretically I should be able to walk, and I was the only one stuck in bed, and I was in bed for something like 8 weeks or something. And you're just that's a tough little existence when your world is just, and obviously neither of my arms work, so I'm being fed melon by people. It just sucked. But yeah, you just had to be very disciplined. And yeah, people would walk in and you would kind of go to hug them, and then you'd be like, wait a minute, I'm stuck to myself here.
Yeah. But still incredible, the power of the medical training that they figured all that out, that would help you. Yeah,
utterly amazing. Some of this stuff is stuff that was learned in the First and particularly in the Second World War by incredible plastic surgeons, and then obviously with the benefit of new modern medicine, they can take this stuff, which in many ways has never really been done for a long, long time, like an abdomen flap of my size, it was huge. And that's because most people that have the level of damage that we have don't survive it. If you're a civilian and something like that happens to you on the motorway, you don't survive the first 5 minutes probably.
Right.
And I survived the first 5 minutes, back to your first question, not because of luck, because I was surrounded by people with some level of medical training that immediately dealt with those. If you can survive the first 5 minutes and then you can make it to an hospital within an hour, you can more often than not get out of those situations.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. Incredible the level of medicine technology and
yeah, and I'd never broken a bone, never had a stitch. Like I'd never been in hospital before, so like this was a proper like baptism of fire for living through it. But also just like I was as fascinated as you are. Like I was just like, you're gonna what? Sew my arm to my you can do that. And it was just like, this is cool.
Cool.
I wish it wasn't happening to me, but
yeah, it's easy for me to say, but I can't imagine the mental strength of it. We've talked about the physical side, but the mental side must have really taken its toll.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely like physically exhausted, so that comes with a mental exhaustion. I was really lucky. I had an amazing support network, like my family, particularly my girlfriend, my now wife, Cornelia. Like she was an absolute rock throughout the whole thing. And with that, just like you're borrowing their morale basically to get you through that first bit in particular. But you are also very acutely aware of like, by the point that I'd managed to find out that my friends had been killed in the blast, that's when you suddenly realize like, one, how close I had come to that being me, but also like in that world where you basically got two choices, which is feel sorry for yourself or get on with it. Like they never had a chance to have a choice. They never had a moment where they could feel sorry for themselves. Like sadly they were gone in an instant. And so like how disrespectful to them would that be? And so like that motivation was big. And at the beginning it was a kind of motivation of guilt, I suppose.
That was going to be a question.
Yeah. But I think now it's definitely moved on from that to a point of, I don't know, like it's just making sure that they know wherever they are looking down or whatever, that I'm not wasting a chance that they should have had.
Absolutely. And do you believe they're looking down on you?
Yeah, listen, I don't know what my belief on, the afterlife is or where they might be, but I absolutely, if it is the pearly gates, my God, I want to rock up to those pearly gates and have them just go, yeah, good effort, mate. Like, that was a pretty good shift you put in after we left. Yeah. And so yeah, I whether they're watching or not, like, and also like it's not just them, like their families are watching. Especially now I'm a TV presenter.
Yeah,
like their families,
everyone's watching.
Family know exactly what I'm doing, and I talk to them often about, particularly when I do projects that involve talking about their sons and or husbands or whoever it might be. Like I'm very aware of like I like at first again I felt bad about like I wanted them to know that I'm not just bringing it up to improve my cause or whatever. Like the only reason I talk about those guys is because I just don't want their legacy to ever be forgotten, because they were unbelievable. Like my one frustration with to go back to your very first question about luck and all that sort of stuff, my genuine thing that I dwell on sometimes in the world of why me is that I know for a fact that the best soldiers there that day didn't come off the battlefield. And that shows you that as well as trained as we were and as, exceptional professionals and, all that stuff that we were, that element of luck played the part. Because if it was about being the best soldier, Sam Alexander and Oliver Augustin would have come home that day and I wouldn't, because they were better than me. They just were. And so, yeah, that's just, it's not fate, but it's luck, I guess.
Hard to deal with though. And yeah, again, that's something that you pay the price mentally more than physically. But if we go back to the physical, how are your injuries now? Are you still battling? Are you still in pain?
Yeah, so I have learned to use my body, from a point of, couldn't cook my own food, couldn't drive my own car, couldn't put my own clothes on. Like, I've forgotten just how bad it was. Like, I stumbled across a video the other day and I just couldn't even move my hands. Like, it was so bad. So of course I've come millions of miles from there in terms of what, like, physically how I can move, let alone the things which I definitely thought were all gone, like being physically active. I'm a crafts person. I do woodwork and metalwork, all this sort of stuff. I thought all that was gone, and I had to relearn it, and I have to do it a different way. But I've learned that stuff. But as far as like my disability is concerned, like it's lots of things. It is, my body doesn't work the way that it should, and I'm weak and I'm fragile. But the biggest thing is living with pain. Like I'm in pain right now as we speak, and I rest my arm and my leg because just gravity acting on my arm is sore. And that is, to varying degrees, but it's never not sore anymore.
And do you think you'll have to have future surgery?
Yeah, I'm as fit and able, and we all are at the sort of age that we are, as we're probably ever going to be. Like, we're all going downhill now.
Unfortunately.
We all know that's happening, and so that will take its effect on everybody. But it will hammer me. I've already got arthritis, like traumatic arthritis. In my mid-30s, so it gets worse. And yeah, this stuff requires maintenance, and so I remember when I had my last surgery in 2016, and what I mean by last is when I was still in the Marines, still in rehab. I thought it was behind me, and maybe I would need surgery a couple of 10 years, 20 years down the line. But no, it was a year before I was back in surgery, getting something fixed, or an infection flared up, or whatever it might be. But the good news is all of that support network and my surgeons and stuff, that still all exists, and it just clicks back into action as and when I need it. But yeah, you don't survive something like this and not require maintenance.
Yeah, that's a nice way of putting it. Maybe not so much maintenance.
I'm like an old car that struggles to pass its MOT.
Yeah, a classic car, we'll say, rather than old.
Nice.
And how do you feel discussing your injuries or disabilities? Do you feel that it because maybe you don't want it to define you and all your experience and all the things you come on to doing now. Does it bother you talking about it?
No, so it all has a time and a place. When it comes to my experiences, and whether that's, actually describing what it's like to be blown up, because not most people know what that sounds like, the realities of being in the armed forces, some of the good, some of the bad, disability, all those sorts of things. I have a voice and I have a platform, and I have a bit of a talent for speaking, I guess.
Yep, definitely.
And so not that I'm a spokesman for my communities, as in I don't know everything, but I know there are some people who don't have the voice, or particularly from the military community. There's some people that just can't talk about the experiences they've lived through. So I am aware that actually, if I've got the ability to do it, I probably should be doing it. So I'm happy to do that. But yeah, you are right. Sometimes, you're defined by something which was in your past, or something which was like a bad day at work, or you're defined by, a lot of the time when we talk about disability as well within the media, and I've learned this probably the hard way. I always say this, if you Google what's JJ Chalmers' disability, it comes up as he was blown up in Afghanistan. That's not my disability. That's my mechanism of injury. Yeah. My disability isn't what happened to me. It's what's happening to me right now. Yeah. Disability is, how does a circumstance, I don't even care what that circumstance was, affect your day-to-day life? And so how does all of this stuff affect my ability to do the things I want to do? What support do I require? What effect does it have on my family? A whole heap of things, but it's about the here and the now. And so whenever people talk about it in that sort of past tense, as if it's, I've overcome my disability and overcome this circumstance, you never do. You learn to live with it. And that's all I'm doing, is every day learning to live with it. And it's constantly changing. It's generally getting worse. But yeah, but I am happy to talk about it, because it's a really important thing to be talked about. Yeah,
I agree. Yeah, and it's only by talking about it that people, it's almost like that acceptance. Of course, we all accept people with disability, but people don't want to talk about it, and we have to.
People are really afraid of saying the wrong thing. Mm-hmm. And listen, I'm the same when it comes to another form of diversity that I'm not comfortable or I don't understand well enough. But the thing I've learned from, essentially acquiring a form of diversity, I suppose is the way to put it, is that there's nothing worse than basically it not being discussed when it's relevant. Mm-hmm. And so it is really important that it's at points when it needs to be talked about, it must be. And that is about that's how we create a more just and equal world, basically. But often people are afraid of saying the wrong thing because they're afraid to get cancelled, essentially, or vilified or pounced upon for saying the wrong thing, rather than, I would like society to allow you to make a mistake, and then we go, by the way, we don't say that, we say this instead, and this is the reason we do that. You've educated that person and they won't make that mistake the next time. And they've grown as a person, and more importantly, society has grown as a whole. And like, I can see that now, because I can see how ignorant I was before, for want of a better word. Like, that's what I was when it came to lots of issues that sit around disability in particular. Like, a lot of the discrimination that is faced by people with disability is often, it's not through malice.
No,
it's just through oversight. Like, people just don't think about it, and in some ways that's terrible as well. Like, we're just overlooked. But as I say, there's not no one goes out a lot of the time. The majority of people don't set out to be hurtful in these circumstances.
No, that's a really good thing to say. We have difficult conversations around a variety of different diverse topics in this podcast, and I always say, please excuse my ignorance. I mean no harm, but just educate me almost.
Totally.
Tell me what I should say,
and in turn educate the people that listen to this or watch this. Like, that's the amazing thing about. And most people are absolutely willing to understand that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
No, absolutely. And just so obviously that changed your career. What's the one thing you really miss the most about being a Marine?
Like the first thing you miss in many ways is the environment. It's the people that you're with. Like, that's the best thing about being a Marine, is being surrounded by your best mates when you go to work each day. The good news with that is, like, the day I left the Marines, my contact list didn't just delete itself. Like, I still see my friends. I don't see them every day when I go to work, but we're still in WhatsApp groups that we talk to each other every day. But also, like your husband, like, we see each other at a wedding or an occasion and that stuff. And that, like, we pick up like it was the day before. That's the most wonderful thing about the level of experience that we've shared, is the shorthand that comes with it. So I do and don't miss that. Of course I miss it, but actually I've still got it. The thing I miss is just doing the job. Like, and there's rose-tinted glasses on that. The actual job of being a Marine, some of it is horrendous. And actually I don't, as we're recording this in Scotland, the weather is horrible outside. And my niece, funnily enough, is off doing her Duke of Edinburgh Silver Award right now. I helped her pack her kit for it. And I'm just like, I'm so glad that's not me. And she's staying in a nice tent with like proper waterproofs and stuff. Like, we didn't have that stuff. Like, if you were wet for 2 weeks or a month or whatever the heck it was. It was horrible. Some of the stuff we did was absolutely unbelievable. Like, we had this phrase which was, civvies would pay thousands to do this, which means, like, to go camping like this, or abseil, or whatever fun activity it was we were doing.
Totally.
That was our job.
Yeah.
Like, we did some ridiculously cool stuff, which didn't even feel that cool at the time because it was normal. Like, how normal the extraordinary things we did became was that's testament to just how cool a job it was.
Oh, I know. I hear these stories all the time. Like, Chris, that was a holiday. You're in a holiday camp.
Yeah.
But amazing. So you touched on your niece. We'll go to talk about family a little bit more now. And how did you meet your lovely wife, Cornelia? Is that right?
Yeah. So,
sorry to interrupt, but just a quick word about our sponsor, Be Daily. I've been subscribing to the Be Daily now since starting my business. It provides relevant and informative information directly to my inbox, not just about the North East, but also national news. If you're interested in subscribing, we'll put the link in the description box so you can get the business news directly to your inbox. Now back to the podcast.
We were studying in Edinburgh, and living in Edinburgh, different universities, different courses and whatnot, but we had a mutual friend who, funnily enough, her father was in the Marines. And so we got to know one another as friends. I worked my magic, and 3.5 years later, she was mine. So we were friends for a long time before we, ever dated or whatever the heck you call that stuff. And sort of, we were best friends, and became an item.
Oh, lovely. And I take it because you've already alluded to the fact that she helped you through the traumatic incident, so you knew her beforehand.
Yeah, so I knew her, and we'd been together a year or perhaps less at the time when I actually sort of went off to Afghanistan. And in many ways, I didn't want to put somebody through that. I certainly knew from the day I joined the Marines and the relationships I'd had along the way that I just felt like that was a an unfair burden to place on somebody. But I broke my rule for Cornelia because I couldn't let her get away. She was amazing. And she'd known me long enough as well to know that, like, and in fairness, she did not know what I did really. Like, nobody does. We're kind of a secretive random world. Like, unless you spend time like really close with the Marines, get on base, and she knows it now. She knows my friends really well, and she has spent lots of time in and out of bases or hospitals or whatever it might be. She gets it a lot more, but at the time it was a completely foreign world to her. And I kept it that way to a degree because I didn't want her and my family to understand the risk that existed, because I didn't think the risk, I knew it was real, but you don't think it's going to happen to you. So it was sort of like, you don't need to worry about that because it's not going to happen. In reality, I know now that that's not the way you should play it, because she wasn't necessarily as ready as she could have been, but the truth is nothing can make you ready for it.
How can you ever be ready for that? And so how did the news get broken to her?
Yeah, so it was a couple of Royal Marines bands officers, so they literally, a conductor and a bugler type thing, they were in the base which was closest to where my parents lived, and my parents were my next of kin and my emergency contact. So they are detailed off to basically come and knock on your front door. And that's what happened. They knocked on my front door. My wee granny answered it, unfortunately. But she took it all kind of well. They didn't quite tell her what was happening, but it was sort of like, where's mum, where's dad? Family, mum and dad kind of gathered back, essentially. There's a lot more to this story, but, to paraphrase, they were told, and then word began to sort of spread. So I think it was my brother that told Cornelia.
Right.
So she phoned her up. And yeah, I mean, honestly, you'd have to ask her about it, because the thing is, while this is all happening, I'm unconscious.
Of course.
Like, it's the easiest week of my life and the toughest week of their lives. And that's what's sort of wild about it. And particularly for Cornelia, because it was difficult for everyone, but my brother had his wife, and my sister had her husband, mum and dad had each other. Cornelia, like, the person she needed most in the world was me.
Yeah.
And I'm the person doing this to her. So, like, it was really, really difficult for her. I think it made a big difference at the point when I finally kind of woke up, but she wasn't for moving from my bedside, essentially. Yeah, she's a badass, like.
Oh, amazing. I take it she helped you get through everything.
Everything. Like, she was interviewed about this, and she came out with an amazing line where she said, I didn't know what to do, I just knew I had to do it. And that is everything. Like, that is from the actual physical stuff of nursing me, and like the unglamorous parts that that no young girlfriend signs up to, which is basically like carrying my catheter around and washing me and like feeding me melon. Like, that stuff's like, that part of it was unreal. But the psychological, the social, the just being the rock, being there on the days where I just didn't have enough, but she would find something to give, like, and she was obviously going through it herself as well, but she didn't really let on for a second. Like, she just got on with it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I can relate to that on a very small scale. Obviously nothing as serious, but you remember when Chris had his tumour, and then it all went wrong, the infection. So yeah, I remember helping him into a little cardboard thing very early in our relationship, dealing with catheters, things like that aren't sexy at all, but you just want to do whatever you can to help.
Yeah.
Get them through.
And like, that's when I already knew Cornelia was special, but at that point, that's when you know that she's something else. And also that like, you've in many ways lived through the worst thing you're going to live through. And don't get me wrong, like, life always throws up challenges, and that's, the trauma of that will always be with us, and being a parent's bloody hard.
Yeah.
We are tested, but every so often we do remind ourselves. Cornelia isn't good at reminding herself, but like, she is unreal. She's such an amazing woman, and let's say she's still that amazing person, but like, when she really, if she can allow herself to look back on what she managed to achieve at the time, it was ridiculous, because I wouldn't have made it through without her.
Oh, that's amazing. And I've met her at the wedding. She is an amazing woman. So, yeah.
Yeah, she was on good form at that wedding as well.
Yeah.
She was definitely cutting loose. So that's the other Cornelia.
Brilliant. We've all got that side, haven't we? And obviously you've got children now. And how would you feel if they want to join the military based on what you've been through?
Yeah. The benefit I have when it comes to my kids one day perhaps coming to say we want to join the military is that I at least know how the military functions in lots of different facets. And the number one is what it's like to walk into a recruiting office and actually, why do you want to be there? Like that would be the first question I would ask my kids if they said, I want to join the military or a particular part of it. I'd find out what it is they want to get from it and what's their motivation. And then I would steer them towards the branch of service that best facilitates that. And so if it's that they want to travel the world, then you probably join the Navy and you go on ship and you adventure. If you want to pick up, skills and, get things that like actual qualifications that you can carry on to later life, God forbid, but join the Air Force. If they want to be a soldier and they want to do the job of, being on the front line and all, that part of it, then you have to join the Marines as far as I'm concerned. Or perhaps the parachute regiment. You have to join the most elite in the sense that if you are going to be in a difficult circumstance like I was, you need to make sure that it's the people either side of you are the very best they can possibly be, as far as I'm concerned. And that's not, to be fair, we have an unbelievable armed forces in every, role and spec, but I just know for a fact, having done the job, that we are the best at what we do. And so I wouldn't want them to be in anything other than the best of hands. But again, it would be about what they want from it, and I would guide them to it. But I absolutely wouldn't put them off it. But like, I definitely, and this as becoming a parent, you see your whole childhood in a different light, and you see your parents in a different light.
Absolutely.
In that sort of like, they will always be my little babies. Of course they will. The idea that they'll grow up and do anything is terrifying to me, let alone that they could do something dangerous like I did. But I was 17 when I joined the Marines, and my mum had to sign a piece of paper to say I could join.
Goodness. And
it was difficult for her, but she knew that was my dream, and you can't stand in the way of your children's dreams. And so that would be part of that question I would ask them, is like, how much do you want this? Like, is it your dream? And if it is, it's not our place as parents to stop them doing that. We just get them to a certain point and nudge them, I guess.
Yeah, you're so right. And do your children ever notice any of your injuries or disabilities?
Yeah, starting to notice it more and more as they get older. My daughter's 7, and she's got a pretty good understanding of it, actually.
Good.
My son is 4, and he's now he's definitely, Daddy has 3 fingers, and what's this and what's that. And that stuff is really interesting because, like, as you know from having kids, as soon as you ask a question, answer a question, the next one is why and why and why and why. And so you start with, why have you got 3 fingers? And the next thing you know, you're explaining like the Middle East peace process, because you're just like, wow, because there will always be a next question. And why was I in that country? Why was I doing this? Why do we need soldiers? What are armies? All these sorts of things. And so it's interesting. Every so often, I don't know, maybe once or twice a year, a new question comes which starts that conversation. And as they get older, we get a little bit further down, not the truth, but I just let them have a little bit more, because they weren't at an age where they could appreciate the complexities of it all and whatnot. But I'm also know that, like, my kids are fortunate that they're growing up with, an understanding and acceptance of disability. Like my daughter's father-in-law has no legs. Do you know what I mean? Uncle Dave with the robot legs. Yeah. And so like her understanding of what someone with a disability is capable of, or what assistance they might require, or how unjust the world can be a little bit, in terms of access, for example. Like, they're growing up with an understanding of that, and I was raised well and compassionate and all these other things, but again, I just wasn't exposed to it to the degree that they are. And that exposure is completely important because it's all normal.
Absolutely. That's why I think it's so important with the Paralympics getting more television these days. You see all these amazing, incredible people. I mean, just seeing elite athletes on their own, they're amazing, incredible. But then when you see these elite athletes that have gone through so much in their life, that's just even more incredible.
Yeah, it's what makes it definitely a massively compelling watch, because we love the backstory of any athlete. Like that's what we as broadcasters do, is sort of make, especially during the Olympics, where it's sort of sports you might not have heard of, whatever it is. Like, one of my things I do as a presenter is, your job is to have the viewer care for the next 5-10 minutes. Like, why do I care if this person wins this medal? And during the Olympics or Paralympics, the simplest thing is because they're Team GB or Paralympics GB, they've got your flag. So like, that's one way in. But, you know, we all love an underdog story, whether it's, you know, non-disabled or within the Paralympics setting. And yeah, like, Paralympians are massive underdogs in life a lot of the time, because just getting up in the morning can be an absolute epic, let alone, you know, what they have to do to get to training in the first place, to then thrash themselves to that ability is unbelievable. And so to be able to really contextualize that for people, to be able to go, like, this is what you're witnessing, like, that's really, really special. And it's educational as well. Like, it just opens people's eyes to the realities of what it is like to live with a disability, and what you can then in turn achieve if you are correctly supported, if you have a just world, essentially.
Absolutely, and that's really important, that raising of aspirations in everyone, no matter what.
Yeah.
Hard to do, but these amazing people, including yourself, you're doing that for people.
Very, very kind.
No, it's true, and obviously you've done so much for the Invictus Games. And that leads us to the conversation about your friendship with Prince Harry. How did that come about?
Through Invictus. Yeah, I met him at the side of a swimming pool at Lympstone. You'll know the name Lympstone, so that's the commando training centre where we all. You don't know. So that's where we all. So that's where we all went through training to become Royal Marines.
Right.
You go to Lympstone, and so we had this thing called the Royal Marines Rehabilitation Triathlon, which was like an adapted triathlon for Marines and whatnot that had, you know, most of us had been wounded in Afghanistan. And this was 2014, I think, and it was about maybe 6 months before the Invictus Games, the first ones in 2014.
Yeah.
And it was very, I think Invictus might have just got a name at that point.
Okay.
Like, it was such, because it was about 8 months from we're going to do this to walking out into the Olympic Park at like this ridiculous, huge sporting event. But Prince Harry had come to Lympstone to learn a little bit about how we put that event on, and meet a few of us, and sort of we got talking at the side of a swimming pool, and he started to explain his vision for what Invictus was going to be. And what was really interesting about that very first conversation, and still rings true to this day, is that it was two things. For one, it was a recovery tool for us, physically, mentally, whatever. It was there for us, but it was an opportunity for us to to have a platform where we could share our experiences that we had lived through. We could share the things that we had learned throughout our recovery, and that was like, that platform, because of him, was so big. You know, it was going to be live on the BBC. It was going to be at, you know, the Olympic Park. It was going to be seen by the world, and so it was this unique opportunity to basically take the world, which, like, the recovery world we were living in was really special. It's still some of the happiest days of my life, being in Headley Court, going through recovery where we first did. Really tough, but like incredible people around me, and, you know, incredible achievements happening around me. But in some ways, I didn't appreciate just how special it was. It was Harry that kind of came in and was like, wow, this is really special. The world needs to see this. Like, it's not just about inspiring other veterans to do this stuff. It's actually, how can we basically bottle this and give it to the world? And that's what Invictus became. It became a brand which sort of, you know, defined our generation of wounded, injured and sick from, you know, sort of Afghanistan, Iraq, and, you know, that pretty special time in the early 2000s.
And what's it like having a friendship with someone who's so close to the limelight? I mean, if you just have a chat, you seem to be in the newspaper saying you're having a bromance. Yeah,
totally. Like, and that's he's an incredibly normal person, which is an exceptional thing considering the world of which he's come from, with no choice. You know, he's been born into a world with extreme privilege, yes, in terms of, you know, living in a palace and, you know, wanting for nothing, I suppose. But equally, you know, an unbelievable level of intrusion and little control of your life in so many facets, even of your days. And somehow, you know, this really ordinary guy comes out of it, which I, you know, so that's why we have a friendship, because he's a lovely bloke. And so it is, you then forget when you're just sat watching a, you know, wheelchair rugby match at the Invictus Games and Dusseldorf just gone past, that actually there are cameras pointed at you because you're sat next to this guy. But to me, he's just my friend. And like, that's, and of course I have a bit more of an understanding of it now because I have a slight level of fame myself. Like, that's, you know, those articles are strictly bromance Invictus bromance as strictly as JJ Chalmers hangs out with Prince Harry. Like, you know, that's hilarious is what that is, obviously. It's so silly. But yeah, I have a little bit of an understanding of what it's like to exist in a world where people know something about you before you've even met them.
And have judgments already made of you.
Big time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the big thing, is the, you know, the way that you can be perceived. And I understand that not just from it happening to me, but, you know, I work in media. So like, I understand how powerful what we say can be, and how much people will believe what they read or what they see. And as soon as you edit anything in the world, it's essentially scripted to some degree.
Yeah.
So like, you know, you look at reality TV, even something like Strictly, like, it's edited. So like, there is the whole narrative is not being said. Like, you're playing a character immediately.
Yeah, almost based on what the story is they want to tell as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, you don't get control over that story. And no, like, you can try and take control of it at points, but until you're the person that's in charge of that thing, you'll never have full control over it.
Yeah, and it must be hard seeing like your friend almost being vilified by the media.
Yeah, I mean, it's, the thing is, like, I'm never going to take my opinion about an individual from any other source than themselves. And that's true because, like, you know, I know Prince Harry, but I know plenty of famous people. You know, I'm very lucky to go to work with, you know, Chris Hoy and Becky Adlington when I work on sports. You know, I've met the great and good of, like, you know, all sorts of weird worlds that I now inhabit. And so I will always take, and always have, because even when I was in the military and you would read a newspaper article about what was happening in Afghanistan, it's not what aligned with the experiences that I or your husband were having. Like, I've always been able to look at a paper or, you know, a press article or whatever it is, or a piece of television news, doesn't matter, and know that's not the full story. So you've got to get the opinion of the individual from the time you spend with them. But it can be, it opens your eyes to how sometimes the press or, you know, whatever, it can be disingenuous, and it can be disingenuous on purpose. And that can be frustrating, because I like to think that of all the things I've done in media, that I've stuck to the truth, and I have, you know, I like to think I've been one of the good guys. And sadly, I work in an industry where not everybody is doing it for the same reason. But they're doing it for that whatever reason they're doing it, and that's, you know, I can't despair too much about that, because it's a big machine, and I don't think you can change it overnight.
No, and how do you feel when you see negative and positive things said about you in the media or on social media?
Yeah, like in the same way, you know, I wouldn't want anybody to try and take a full understanding of me as a human being from what they just read about me or see about me. You know, it's so funny when I did Strictly, for example, like, people will form an opinion about you and think that you're, like, I don't know, something negative because you can't dance the Paso Doble. Do you know what I mean? Like, that stuff's like, and like, Strictly was a good big eye opener as to, because it's so huge, and so there is a lot of noise. So yeah, people are saying stuff about you all the time, and again, they're judging you based on something which the whole point is you're not meant to be good at it.
Yeah.
You know, and so as I've got better at my job as a broadcaster, like, there is less and less of the negative stuff, and that's warranted because I've got better at my job. But also, like, I've got to a point where I take I take a lot of it less personally, but the problem is when you read, it's that one bad line, it stings like, like lemon in a cut. It just stings and it sticks with you every so often. And you just try to remind yourself, though, that when someone has an opinion about you, particularly when I do my job, you can put strictly to one side because, again, that's just a bit of fun. When I'm actually, presenting the Olympics or the Paralympics or whatever, and somebody says, "Oh, he's rubbish," or whatever it might be, as long as my boss doesn't think I'm rubbish and hires me back to do my job, they're the knowledgeable one whose opinion I should trust. Some random person from some random corner of the internet, like, their opinion shouldn't matter that much to me.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm not strong enough to let that be the case, and you want to answer back or be like, it's not as easy as it seems. But yeah, you just need to sort of bite your tongue, and you need to like look to either my bosses or a lot of the time to my wife, to Cornelia. Like, she's my biggest fan and my biggest critic. For good reason. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like, she'll be the first person to text me and be like, "Your hair was rubbish," or whatever it might be. Because she knows what I'm actually going through when I do my job, particularly in like live TV. Like, it is really, really, really hard what we do. And I say that like I'm not looking for sympathy, but like I know what a hard job is. Like, I've and it is not an easy one. And it has its. But like I used to beat myself up. That's the other thing that I've learned, probably from the world, hating on you sometimes, is that no one's going to hate on you more than yourself, unfortunately.
True.
And like I used to walk away from, like, you've been on air for 6 hours and you made 2 mistakes in the whole program, and so to me that program was rubbish because I made those mistakes. I've got to a point now where I'm the first person to know I've made those 2 mistakes, but I'm not going to let those 30 seconds of TV ruin 6 hours. Like,
No.
I know when I've done a good job, and I know when I could have done better.
Yeah, we've spoken to David Harper about this, and he actually says when you stutter or stammer or you say the wrong thing, it makes you more human. And at the end of the day, people warm to that because we're all humans. So actually, it makes them buy into you and like you more.
Completely. And I definitely see that. And ultimately, and again, like, this is literally the words out of my, one of my boss's mouths, that I work with on the Olympics. And it's just like, it's not about the mistake, it's about the bit that comes after. It's how you recover from those mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like that's, and when you're not skilled enough, and which I was once upon a time, and I'm still got a lot to learn, don't get me wrong, but like there was a time when I didn't know how to recover from things. And unfortunately, you need to have those failures to learn how you recover from certain situations, or to forgive yourself when you stutter and stammer, because it's completely human.
Definitely.
And so yeah, like it's been an interesting journey, but along with getting better at my job and becoming more of myself on TV or radio, wherever it is. Like, some people will say like, "Oh, you're such a natural." And that's actually a bit of an insult, because I'm not a natural. It's been like 8 years of hard work is what's actually made me into the broadcaster that I am.
Right.
I'm just good enough at my job now that I can appear natural. Because what we're doing is not natural. Like,
No.
you're sat there thinking,
really hard. Yeah, even just on this podcast, and it's not live. People don't appreciate, you've got to listen, you've got to almost react to what they say, which you don't know what they're going to say, and it's incredibly tough.
Yeah, it's hard work. And so yeah, I've learned that of myself, but I've also learned to give myself a break along the way as well.
Absolutely. But I think what you said there about it's kind of not what you do, it's how you react to it. And that's life, essentially, isn't it?
Big time.
Because you're not in control of what's going to happen.
No. And again, like, I've lived through something which was completely out of my control, essentially, and I have managed to, I like to think, slowly but surely it's how I've recovered from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And just going back to that again, like, how different do you think your life would be now if you'd never been in that IED explosion?
Yeah, that's a wild one to think about. I like, plan A was go to Afghanistan, come back, continue in the Marines for a bit. I then wanted to become a fireman. I wanted to do that for a few years. And I had studied to be a teacher, and I would have returned to being a teacher eventually. I mean, I still pay my subs to the General Teachers Council each year. I'm still technically a teacher. I could go on the supply list
Clinging
tomorrow.
on to it.
Yeah. But so I think that's what life would have looked like. And I like to think that because of the person I was, and, I still am, but, I'm leading to this, I would have done well at those things. and I would have enjoyed them, and that would have been absolutely fine. Clearly, stumbling into TV in particular, which is like, it's a nonsense. Like, I get it. It's so funny from the outside. I was kind of reminded of it at the Invictus Games recently. So I was presenting the Invictus Games for the BBC there, and there was one night that we had lots of competitors come to sort of be in the back of shot and just be part of the interview, just to make it, get a sense of the occasion and the event. And it reminded me, like, just how special it was the first time that I was in their shoes. And I'd forgotten just how, because it's my job now. And I'm not saying I take it for granted. I'm not saying I don't enjoy it, but I'd forgotten just how kind of special it is. Mm-hmm. And like, in many ways, like, they'd given up like a night out essentially to come and do this, be on the One show.
Yeah.
And they thought it was wicked. Mm-hmm. And I was like, fair enough, because it is wicked. Of course it is. Mm-hmm. And so, like, that was a nice reminder that actually what I do on a sort of daily basis is a really cool thing, because I just see it as my profession. And I just apply the same skills which I would have applied to the Marines, to being a fireman if I'd done that, and going back to a teacher. And when I say skills, I mean, it's really just the values that I have. I'm still the same person that I ever was. I just have a different job now.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to lie, the job that I have does come with its very silly, weird, I've been to royal weddings, I've been to the coronation, I was part of the Queen's funeral, and I've been to sporting events that people, dream of going to, the Olympics, the Paralympics, you name it. Like, the access that you have doing the job that I do, the people you get to meet, the people you get to become friends with, like, Chris Hoy's a mate of mine now. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like, how did that happen? That stuff is the stuff where I need to stop and pinch myself every so often.
Oh, it's pretty cool, for sure.
Yeah.
And at the time of recording this, it's coming up to Remembrance Day. I'm sure you'll be involved in some sort of TV coverage for the day. If you weren't involved in the TV coverage, how would you mark the day?
So I've marked it in so many different ways. Like, I've been in hospital for it and marked it literally somberly by myself. I'm part of an organisation or a club called the Kazivat Club. So we are, to be eligible to join the club, you were wounded in service in Afghanistan or Iraq. And so we now have places at the cenotaph, so we can march on the cenotaph if you so choose. And, I haven't yet done that, but the option is always there. I go to in the last couple of years, I've gone to my local war memorial, and I've taken the kids, because they're of an age now that they are beginning to understand, and it's really important to me that they sort of understand. Like, their middle names are Sam and Ollie, from the guys that I killed, that were killed in my blast. So, like, it's important to me that they understand why this is important to all of us. So I've done that a lot. Remembrance Day, that always falls on whatever day of the week. And to me, the important thing to do, this is how I like to play it basically, is to live your day as per normal, but make sure you take a stop at 11 o'clock for 2 minutes. Because the whole point of that sacrifice that people made was so that you could live your day the way that you want and go about your business the way that you do. Like, I remember doing that on Strictly Come Dancing. On the 11th, we literally went in and did our normal day's practice, and at 11 o'clock, it just so happened that in the studio we were practicing in, there was a war memorial in a graveyard across the road, and Amy, my partner, and I walked round and took 2 minutes to do that and went straight back to work. That's the whole point. We should be able to it's taking that moment, that's the important thing, but also living your life is actually even more important.
Yeah, that's really poignant. I think obviously people do think about that silence, 2 minutes silence, but then they maybe might try and mark it by doing something a little bit more special, a little bit more, can't do anything too celebratory that day.
Yeah, well, I've been at the cenotaph, which is the sort of, I don't know, we've all watched it on the TV in London. It is the sort of the centre of remembrance. It's what many people will think of. And I've watched that on the TV since I was a little boy, and, had an appreciation of what it looked like. When you actually go there, and I went there as part of the BBC's team a few years ago, I was struck by how, except for the somber moment, the day is very jovial. because you're talking about a whole bunch of veterans getting back together.
Yeah.
And so they know when to behave themselves, but actually they spend the rest of the day having a great time. And that's how it should be.
Yeah.
Like, because in amongst, when I have my 2 minutes and I think about, the sadness that I have at those we lost, and it's not just Sam and Ollie, James, it was Abdullah, like, the guys that I knew and have lost, there is a sad part of that when I think about, what was lost. But it's also a moment to just think about how amazing they were, and like the great times that we had, and the little things that will stay with me, the little silly stories, the little moments. Like, that's like the life that I was very lucky to have with them, even just for the briefest of moments. Yeah. Because it was just a very small part of my life, but it will have a big impact on the rest of my life. Of course it will. But yeah, so it's not all sadness to me.
Yeah, that's really nice to hear. And do you feel that as a nation we're starting to forget?
I think it goes through sort of peaks and troughs. Like, I think I think it will be fascinating to see what the sort of generation that comes after us, like our kids' generation, like how they perceive the First and Second World Wars in particular, because we grew up with a time when First and Second World War veterans were, they were, and their neighbours, and so like it was very real then, and so are they going to feel like of the First World War generation like we do about the Napoleonic generation, very detached, of course. Of course, like, I think the one thing I'll say about our generation of veterans is that the support that we've been fortunate enough to have throughout the years and throughout the last couple of decades, I think we all thought would go away a lot. I was about to say quicker than it has, but it just hasn't gone away. Like, it might not be to the same extent that it was in those 2000s when we were at war, but I continue to be supported by charities and organisations, the armed forces. It is still there, and there are people working really hard to ensure that, the things that I will have to live with as a result of, my service is looked after for the rest of my life. And that was an unbelievable time in history where, in many ways, I thank Help for Heroes a lot for doing this at that period. They essentially rebranded what a veteran was for our generation. A veteran to you and I was those old guys with a rack of gongs from the Second World War. And I think a lot of people have realised that a veteran, is of our generation. It's of Northern Ireland. It's of the Falklands, Korea, like. And you can disagree with the conflict, but the actual act of somebody signing up and choosing to fulfill that role, which, listen, we all, soldiers included, wish we lived in a world where we didn't have to have conflicts and we didn't have to go to war and we didn't have to do these things. But it's just not, it's not how it works. We need to have brave people who are willing to stand up when evil rears its head and whatnot. And so I think I've been really pleased to see that didn't just drop off the cliff like I thought it would. I think Ukraine has brought it back into people's focus as well. Like, and I've visited there in the last 6 months. Like, what is going on there is on a scale even that I can't begin to sort of comprehend, the real human suffering. But equally, and I say this quite a lot, but in that worst of humanity is when the best of humanity rears its head. And that is, the brave people of Ukraine, but it's also like, back to our generation, it's the amazing people that just put their hand up and said, can I help in some way? And like, I always talk about this lady, she's called Kath the Cake Lady, who used to bring us cakes onto the ward in hospital. Basically every Wednesday, and she's gone to all the Invictus Games and brought cakes with her. Like, she's a ridiculous larger than life character, but to me she's the perfect definition of a person who saw people that needed help and went, I can bake cakes, does that help? And somebody went, yeah, do that. And it reminds me of that very special time, and your husband served in Afghanistan at that time as well. When actually the nation just wanted to do their part to lift our spirits or support us in some way. And that's something that we in the armed forces hadn't necessarily experienced up to that point. And it was like, none of us joined the armed forces for a pat on the back or a thank you or anything like that. We do it because it's service and it's ingrained in us and we love doing our job. But actually, you know, when somebody does take the time to do something for you, it reminds you that people really, they do care.
Yeah, actually, I'm pretty sure that Chris probably joined the Marines for cake, if I'm honest. And
He did get that. He did do well.
And just to end on the final question before the regular feature.
Oh, yes.
You know, what do you look forward to about the future?
So many things. I mean, I definitely, you know, in amongst all the sort of nonsense and stuff I do, like
It's
the number
not
one
nonsense. Why do you define it as nonsense? It's great. It's amazing.
Yeah, well, listen, like, as I said earlier, like, I just go to work and do my job, but I am acutely aware of just how, like, what the industry that I work in is. Do you know what I mean? And I just find it amazing and silly that I stumbled into it, and now I'm on the telly, and I'm like, I've got a friend that I went through recovery with, and every time I see him, it's the consistency of the joke that I love. Wherever I am, he just goes, "It's JJ off the telly," and it's just, he's been doing it for like 4 years now. Do you know what I mean? Every time I see him. Like, oh, it is like, sometimes I am like, bloody hell, I am JJ off the telly. What a strange thing to have become. So that's why I call it nonsense. But yeah, I still view it as a job. So, but whilst I love all those things, like the number one thing, and you'll be the same, is being a dad. Like, I bloody love my kids. I love this, the hardest thing I've ever done. It's the greatest challenge. Mm-hmm. It's the most rewarding thing I've done. So, like, ensuring that they have the future that, you know, that they can have, and that they can grow up to do the things that they want to do, and all those sorts of things. You know, I think I've, you know, with this career, been able to secure that, which is really, really nice. But like, all I ever tried to do, and it's the same thing I did when I was 17 and I decided to join the Marines, was to challenge myself, basically, to go just a bit further than I thought I was capable of doing, and always being offered something and going yes, and then finding out what you said yes to. Mm-hmm. And it is just that, and that's what I want my kids to realize, is that they are capable of just a bit more than they think they are. And like, that's that, like, I'm always trying to sort of praise them for effort and resilience and these things that just will make them want to go that little bit further and try that little bit harder, whether they fail or they succeed or whatever it is. And like, that's, you know, within my industry, that is, you know, what's the next big job or the next big task or the slightly further up the ladder you want to be. What do I need to be able to do that? And, you know, and that is just about, am I good enough at my job? Am I competent enough? Am I confident enough? All of those things, the things that I can control, basically. Yeah. And yeah, I just want to, I look forward to, I hope, and I work in a fickle industry. That's partly why I call it nonsense as well. You know, it is unpredictable and fickle. But I hope I could do this for the rest of my days. Do you know what I mean? And what that is, or what it looks like, not least because telly will bloody turn into YouTube. Do you know what I mean? Like, who knows what we're doing. But I just want to keep turning up, having different experiences, meeting lovely people, you know, and doing my job. And then do that, come home, and actually be the real JJ Chalmers, who is a dad of 2.
Yeah. Oh, amazing answer. I'm sure you're doing that for your children right now, and you're so inspiring for everyone, let alone your children. Although sometimes they often think, oh, Dad's just dad, and that's
100%. It's so silly, especially now. And that's the thing, now that they're at school, like, again, the nonsense of it all is that because they don't see me differently. Mm-hmm. And now that they're at school, it's not until they met other children who, you know, that know I'm famous, that they suddenly go like, Dad, are you famous? And what is famous?
Amazing.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And you are like, kids in the playground will be like, that's JJ Chalmers.
Yeah.
Like, one of my kids' friends the other day came over for a play, and he was sort of writing his little, you know, diary of what they did at the weekend, and it was like, I went to Haley's house and I played with this and we did that, and JJ Chalmers was there. Just like, what?
Oh, that's so cool though. And right, so regular 10 questions.
Here we go.
And these are kind of quick fire, looking at the time, because I know you've got to go and collect your kids soon.
Yeah, there we go.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best, how would you rate yourself at these things?
Okay.
How good looking are you?
Probably about a 6, but I think with old age I'm getting better.
Okay, brilliant.
Lucky me.
How funny are you?
I mean, I think I'm a 10. and humor's always been a massive part of my life because it is very much within the military setting. What I will recognise is that my humour doesn't always align with the world I find myself in. So I don't think I come off as funny, perhaps, as I'd like to, because I'm having to, I'm hilarious when I'm with your husband.
Yeah, I know what you mean. How good at cooking are you?
I'm like a 3. I don't season enough. I scrimp on things. Cornelia's a really good cook, and so she handles
sorted.
it. Yeah.
How good at singing are you?
10 for effort, but I've got a pretty croaky voice. Somewhere in the middle, 5 or 6.
Okay. Tolerance to alcohol?
Oh, 10. Yeah. No. I, as you know from the wedding, I go for it, and I don't have to be dragged out of places. I don't throw up much.
Oh. Amazing.
Pretty good.
I was driving, so you were doing my shots for me, and you were handling them well. Very impressed. Parenting skills.
I'd like to think I'm a pretty involved father, but my lord, do we all have more and more to learn. But I'd like to think I'm sort of somewhere in the 7 range.
Good score. How good a friend are you?
I'm becoming a better friend. I've been selfish with my career of late, and I have let people slip by the wayside, and that's not fair. So I think for the last few years I've probably been about a 3, but I like to think that I'm on my way back up, and I'm probably close to 7 again.
Oh, that's really honest. And intelligence score?
It depends what you mean by intelligence.
There's so many levels.
I'm not I'm like a 3 in the academic. I'm not. But I think I always say, let me get this one out right. Would I rather? It's the old jack of all trades, master of none. But I'd rather know something about everything rather than everything about something.
Okay.
So I'm quite happy knowing just enough about everything.
Cool.
To give you a number, in real world intelligence, about an 8.
Brilliant. How kind are you?
I like to think I'm pretty kind. That's one I'm up the top end in. I'm an 8 or a 9 on that.
Fantastic. And the final question, how good at sex are you?
I think I'm a 10. My wife will probably think I'm a 3 or something like that.
Okay, I'll have to ask her next time.
Yeah, get her on.
You've been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, JJ.
It's been an absolute pleasure, honestly. I've loved every second.
Hi, it's Ryan from Harvey Hugo, and I am the videographer here. So, are you looking for a new way to stand out in today's crowded digital landscape? Well, look no further than podcasting. Here at Harvey Hugo, we specialise in creating and producing high quality podcasts that engage and inspire audiences. And with our comprehensive production services, we'll take care of all the technical details, from the recording and the editing to the distribution and the promotion. With millions of listeners tuning in every day, it's the perfect time to start connecting with them on a deeper level. Let Harvey and Hugo help you unlock the power of podcasting and take your message to the next level.